Hi there, my name is Oliver. Tonight I will be reading chapters 13 through 15 of The Sleeping Dragon, Book 1 of the trilogy Guardians of the Flame, The Warriors. In this penultimate part, we rejoin the group after their harrowing ordeal, having just defeated Ullman and his slavers, though at heavy cost to Andrea and Doria. Now, they have their sights set on the mountain Bremon, the gate between worlds, and perhaps a way home. Let's get into it. Chapter 13. To Bremon. Melancholy and despair, though often, do not always concur. There is much difference. Melancholy fears without a cause, this upon great occasion. Melancholy is caused by fear and grief, but this torment procures them and all extremity of bitterness. Robert Burton. Carl didn't know when it had happened, but he'd developed a habit, rubbing his wrists, as though to reassure himself that the cuffs were gone. It had been almost a week since Ahira had used the tools reclaimed from the slavers to chisel them all free of the remnants of their bonds. Well, the physical remnants, anyway. Carl dropped his right hand to the saddle, shaking his head at the way his wrist was reddened and sore. He shook himself, then gave a quick tug on the reins. The mare responded by prancing to a halt and letting the two wagons pass her by. Carl stroked her neck, smiling fondly. "I'd give you a name, but we're going to have to turn you all loose when we reach the mountain. I can't quite see trying to take you through the gate, and it'll be easier on me if I don't name you. Understand?" She lifted her head and whinnied. Carl chuckled. It wasn't a response to his question. She was just irritated at being passed by the harnessed horses, twitchy at that insult to her, a member of the saddle-bearing gentry. "Well, at least I understand you." He let her break into a slow walk, while he raised himself in the saddle, drinking in the cool, sweet air of the grassland beyond the waste. An east wind brought him a faint, minty smell, presented him with the tang of sun-baked grass, and a distant suggestion of musk. Walter, from his usual perch on the seat of the flatbed, cocked his head and lifted a water bag. "Thirsty?" More out of sociability than thirst, Carl urged his mare over to the flatbed and leaned over to accept the bag, while his mare kept to the cart's pace, her head held high, a bit of extra bounce to her step, as though to deny any association with the dusty, plodding dray horses. Idly, Carl wondered about the fate of the two mules. Perhaps they had run off, sometime while in the slaver's possession. Possibly the roast on the slaver's campfire had been a haunch of mule. He shrugged. The only people who knew were safely dead, and he hadn't had the time or inclination to quiz them about the matter. But there could be others on our heels. We'll have to watch out until we're safely away from this filthy world. Uncorking the bag, he took a shallow swig of the warm, leather-tasting water, then recorked it and handed the bag down to Walter. "When we stop to rest, I want to get in some sword practice, if you're game." Ullman's sword was a fine piece of steel, a rust-free length of basket-hilted saber, faintly curved. But it was barely half the length of Carl's sword. Using it called for a totally different style of swordplay, with much more attention to parrying at close range. The sword was mainly a thrusting weapon, rather than a slashing one on attack, although its edge was sharp enough to shave with. His Barak self seemed comfortable with it. Still, best to be sure, practice as much as possible. "I'm sure Ullman would want me to use it well," he thought sarcastically. It hardly seemed fair that the bastard was beyond pain, though. Then again, life isn't fair. "So, are you up for it?" Am I what?" "Never mind." From the high seat of the other wagon, Andy cursed in low tones at her team of horses. 6 were probably more than the wagon required, but they had the harnesses to spare, and putting 6 on meant not having to stop twice a day to change teams. Carl turned to Walter. "She's coming back from it, at least a bit." Walter took a grimy rag from the seat beside him and mopped at his forehead. "Some do." His next sentence, unvoiced, was, "And some don't." Doria was close to being an automaton, responding only to direct questions, and then only with monosyllables. She ate barely enough to keep a lizard alive, and left the wagon only under duress. Carl had tried to take her aside, to explain that everything was under control, that she didn't have to worry. He'd only tried that once. Any touch set her screaming, a high-pitched wail that wouldn't cease until she collapsed with exhaustion. Maybe, with the right kind of care, Doria would someday be well again. And maybe they should have taken a detour to the Tabernacle of the Healing Hand. But Ahira had overruled that. There was no way they could go directly there. They just didn't have enough water to make it to the far side of the waste. And if there was another slaver team... Ahira was right. The best thing to do was to go ahead, get home as soon as possible. Back home, psychiatric therapy might not be easily effective, but Carl would find a therapist to treat what was wrong with Doria, even if he had to break a few arms. Fine, let the shrink write off their history of the past few months as some sort of group delusion, but Doria would get the help she needed. For everything. Walter looked up at him, his brow wrinkling. "You know, don't you?" "About what?" "Doria." Carl nodded. "Yes." Walter considered it for a moment, as he twirled the reins around his fingers. "It has to be... what's his name, that dragon? Elagon." The thief shuddered. "With all she's gone through, do you think she'll ever be all right?" Carl shook his head. "No." "How sure?" He shrugged. "Not very." There was something strange about this whole conversation. Walter asking him? "I remember when you sounded a lot more sure of yourself." "So do I." Walter reached back for a wine bottle, uncorked it, and drank. "So do I." He offered Carl a swig, which Carl declined with a shake of the head. "Carl, what do we do about it?" Carl shrugged and urged his mare into a trot. "We go home, and then we do what we can. And I'll carry a load of guilt with me to my grave. None of this would have happened if I hadn't freed Elagon, beat Ullman. And if I'd known, would I have left Elagon chained in a cesspool? Or would I have chosen to spend the rest of my life living with that?" "And what will that be?" Walter asked, his voice drifting forward. Carl didn't respond. It wasn't really a day for answers. Chapter 14. The Warrens. Hence loathed melancholy, of Cerberus and blackest midnight born, in Stygian cave forlorn, mongst horrid shapes and shrieks and sights unholy. John Milton. Bremon loomed ahead, a dark, jagged mass, blocking half the noon sky. Driving the flatbed wagon, Ahira shook his head and swore softly under his breath. The damn mountain always loomed in front of them, even though his mental picture of Orion's map suggested that they were finally near the known entrance. Perhaps the rough copy he had made would have differed, but that had been lost, along with much of their supplies, to the slavers. But no, that wasn't it. Orion's map was clear in his mind. It was just that Bremon was too large, too massive, too gently sloped to have a clear edge, a noticeably demarked base. Next to him on the flatbed's broad seat, Hakim peered down at him. "Are we there yet?" he asked, for only the 30th time that morning. Ahira jerked on the reins. The flatbed's two horses shuffled to a quick stop on the gently uphill slope. "You little ass!" Andrea shrilled. Ahira turned to see her wrestle the other wagon's team to a halt, the noses of the lead horses stopping scant inches behind the back of the flatbed. "You just stay there!" She bounded out of the high seat of her wagon and stalked toward him through the knee-high golden grasses. Excuse me," Hakim said. "I just remembered something I've got to talk over with Eri." He made a quick exit, going around the opposite side of the flatbed from Andrea's approach, and disappeared into the other wagon. Ahira didn't blame him for manufacturing a need to talk to the wizard, or Carl for cantering his horse ahead past the flatbed. This sort of outburst was becoming more and more common.
"I can't really say that I blame her, but I don't know what I should do about it."
Perhaps the best thing would be to permanently relinquish leadership of the group to Carl. No, that wouldn't do. Carl and Hakim had been lucky, but wrong. As Andrea planted herself in front of him, he rubbed at his eyes with his thumbs, then let his hands drop. What is it now?
She threw up her arms. How many times have I asked you, politely, mind, to give me a bit of goddamn notice before you stop? Do you really want my team climbing into the back of this little dog cart of yours?
Her face reddened. Ahira stifled a snapped retort and raised a palm. Just take it easy, please.
If you're so concerned about my stopping suddenly, then why don't you just let your wagon lag behind a few yards?
That was an obvious response, but a wrong one. Clearly, she was playing me and my shadow with the flatbed out of an unconscious desire to speed him up, to speed them all up, to get herself away from this world and home. I'm sorry, he said. My fault. It's just that... He'd tried to keep his voice level, but that only enraged her.
Don't you dare try and patronize me, she said, white-lipped. I've got a job to do driving that stubborn, idiotic team of horses.
I said,
fighting 'em more than half the time. They've got to trust me to know that I won't lead them into...
No, they don't. He punctuated all 3 words by banging his fist on the wagon's seat. Ahira vaulted heavily to the ground. We're stopping here. Now. Enough of this. Granted, Andrea had been through a hard time. Given, it was at least partly his fault. But enough of treating her like
everyone used to treat me. Like some sort of phoebe, giving her the job of driving the big wagon because it gives her something to do, not because she's best at it. Even if she wants that sort of treatment, it's the wrong thing to do. And it stops here.
We stop here. You can turn your horses loose or butcher them for supper for all I care. He raised his head and his voice. Carl! The big man urged his horse over. Meal break? He jerked his thumb at the mountain behind him. I saw some trees ahead, about a mile or so, I think. It'd be a bit more comfortable up there. Ahira shook his head. No, I was telling Andrea that we're stopping here, permanently as far as the wagons go. Hakim's in the other one, talking to Ari. You go get him, have him saddle a horse. Then you two get the joy of riding out and seeing if you can find an entrance. The entrance. And if we can't? Carl frowned disapprovingly. Ahira's hands itched for his axe hilt. Then be back by sundown. You'll try again tomorrow at first light. Carl's horse took a prancing step back. I've got a better idea, I think. Doria's got a locate spell. Have her find the entrance. Andrea held up a hand.
Do you two want an opinion, or don't you give a damn what I think?
Her lips pursed. She opened her mouth as though to go on, then stopped and started again.
It would be better to leave her alone. For 2 reasons. First, location spells are finicky. If she doesn't know exactly what she's looking for, the spell will fasten on something else, something that fits her internal description. Besides, her shoulders twitched beneath her robes, I think it's best to leave her alone in any case. Don't put any demands on her, not if you don't have to. I don't know if trying to get her to do something might push her over the edge.
From his perch atop his horse, Carl sighed. I guess you're right. I was just thinking that a bit of activity would be good for her. Help her take her mind off of... He gestured absently. Everything.
What the hell do you know about it? Andrea snapped.
Carl sat silent for a moment, then shook his head slowly from side to side. No, I wouldn't say that I know much about anything. He gave her a thin smile, then turned his mare away and trotted back to the other wagon. Ahira stared off into the distance, keeping his eyes on the mountain, off Andrea, not saying anything. Finally, she broke the silence.
What was that supposed to mean?
Ahira moved to the flatbed and busied himself with unhitching the horses. Only 2 things that I can think of. First, that he doesn't understand you, for which I can't exactly blame him. I don't either.
I was trying to explain it to him when...
Her voice trailed off into choking sounds.
When everything fell apart, and now he's treating me like I'm soiled.
Don't. Ahira spun around. Don't even think that. I haven't always been Carl's greatest admirer, but you're dead wrong. He put out a hand. She took it with trembling fingers. I don't think that Carl's too good at handling guilt. That's what you're seeing, not anything else. Carl knows, we all know, the difference between a victim and... He clenched his jaw. Maybe Carl hadn't been wrong in going back to finish off Ullman and his slavers, despite the risk. Just take my word for it.
She nodded slowly. You said that there were two things that he meant.
Ahira returned her nod. That maybe there's a difference between knowing and caring. And Carl cares about you, as if you didn't know. He once came close to killing Hakim over you, but he stopped. Maybe it was squeamishness, maybe not. He squeezed her hand more tightly, but he didn't hold back when it came to Ullman, did he?
And for that I'm supposed to fall into...
And for that, he interrupted, you're free to do whatever you want, without looking over your shoulder. He released her hand. I need a bit of help with these horses. Are you available? Slowly, she nodded. Carl and Walter discovered the entrance on their second day of searching. A spiral search pattern had given them a horseback view of various naked, slightly wooded, and heavily overgrown slopes, a few dozen small animals that scurried for cover at their approach, and more than a few dozen birds, who were only too glad to interrupt their constant search for food to chitter and twerp at Carl and Walter. The thief glared up at Carl from the back of his mount, a mild-mannered sorrel gelding. I've got an idea. What say we take a break? Let me get away from this vicious beast for a while. Walter patted at the crossbow lashed to his saddle in front of him. Besides, maybe I could shoot us some dinner. Carl chuckled and stroked at his mare's neck. It was dry, unsweaty. Probably she could go on almost forever at this slow walk. Why not? My horse seems a bit tired, he lied. Although I wouldn't give odds that you could hit a bird with that bow. Your aim was good enough when it counted, no? That was a good point. Carl dismounted, while from the ivy-covered rock face to their right, a small bird twittered its own opinion of Walter's skill with a crossbow. Walter jerked his horse to a stop and got off with none of his usual grace, then rubbed at his back and thighs. It was his own fault, really. If the thief had taken his turn on horseback like the others, he would have at least had the minimal horsemanship of Ahira and Andy. The bird scolded them again. Carl chuckled as he slipped the bridle from his horse's neck. Seems that crow doesn't think much of your riding ability, Walter. The thief scowled as he unstrapped the crossbow. It's not a crow. Too small. He pulled back the string and dropped a quarrel into the slot. Possibly it's tasty. Walter raised the bow and took aim. Now that was unreasonable, trying to shoot a bird out of pique. Carl shrugged. On the other hand, the thief wasn't very accurate with a crossbow. The night they had killed Ullman and the others, it had been Walter's ability to move silently and almost invisibly in the dark that had served them well, not his indifferent aim. On the other hand, hell, I've run out of hands. Just leave it alone. Twing! The bolt went low and wide, vanishing in the ivy. With a twitter and a flutter, the bird flew away. Carl forced himself not to smile. Well, now we can have a whole side of mountain for supper. You like yours medium rare, or... Hey, what are you doing? The thief let his bow drop to the ground and walked toward the rock face. Give me a hand up, Walter said, his eyes on the spot where the arrow had disappeared. It should have bounced off, or stuck itself in or something. Carl went over and knelt on one knee, cupping his hands, then straightening and lifting as Walter settled a sandaled foot into his grip. The thief caught a handhold somewhere above and scrambled up the ivy. Carl looked up. Walter was gone. Where? The thief's smiling face poked through the green curtain. I believe that this is what we call gin. His unseen hands clapped. I don't have a light, but this thing looks as if it goes down and in for about 1,000,000 miles. You want to go back for the others, or do I? Dealer's choice, Carl said calmly, his heart beating a rapid tattoo. We're going home, where it's safe, comfortable. I'm going home. Thank God. With everyone gathered just inside the entrance, Ahira took a few minutes to check each pack, working easily in the speckled light coming through the ivy. It would have been possible to make the others check their own gear, but that would mean waiting until their eyes adjusted to the dimness. Better to get going as soon as possible. He considered the 5 water skins. Enough for 4 days, maybe 5 if they went on a strict water ration. It would be nice to have more, but they had lost most of the water bags to Ullman's group, and carrying a barrel through the tunnels would be awkward at best. Ahira cinched Hakim's pack a bit tighter. No need to have things fall out, he said.
Hakim smiled. Whatever you say, fearless leader. I've got a suggestion, though. Yes? Ari and Doria have their glow spells. Why not save on the lantern's oil and use one now? Ahira thought it over for a moment. Not necessarily a bad idea, although the wizard spell would be good only temporarily. The light would dim and go out. But Doria's glow spell was more powerful. It would keep whatever it was put on shining forever. Carl, your sword, please. Carl lumbered over, ducking his head under a rocky overhang. Don't you trust me with an edged weapon? Ahira smiled as he hefted the blade. A decent saber, actually, but not quite the luxury-class blade that Carl's broken sword had been. No, I'm afraid that you'll slice your foot off. Seriously, I'm going to have Doria— he jerked his chin at the cleric, who was sitting slumped next to her pack. I'm going to try to have her glow it for you. Leaving Doria alone hadn't improved anything. Perhaps succeeding at something would be good for her. The point? Carl's forehead furrowed. Not to be critical, but you're not putting me in the lead, are you? Spelunking isn't exactly my specialty.
Damn it, Carl, give me a minute to finish. It'd be nice not to be interrupted. It'd be a change, anyway.
You get this spot just behind me. I won't need much light. Dark side, remember? If the tunnels were as old as Aurene and that dragon Carl had talked to had claimed, it probably wouldn't be necessary for Ahira to go first. Any sections of the ceiling that were shaky at all would have already fallen. But no sense in taking chances. Besides, this was going to be easy for Ahira. A dwarf was built for easing through tunnels. Without adequate light, these humans would probably trip over their own feet. The sword clutched in his hand, Ahira walked over to Doria and squatted in front of her. Doria? She just sat there, her robes gathered loosely around her, eyes staring blindly through him. Doria, I need your help. No response. Please? Nothing. He reached out a hand and laid it gently on her shoulder. Doria? Her face came alive, creasing into a wide-eyed rictus of terror. She inhaled violently and screamed, and kept screaming, until Ahira's ears rang and Doria lay curled on the floor of the tunnel, whimpering as she gasped for breath. Ahira looked behind him. Aristobulus, Hakim, Andrea, and Carl stood shoulder to shoulder, glowering in unison.
I had to try. We may need her later. No, make that...
I have to try, he said to Doria, pretending to ignore the way 4 pairs of eyes were trying to bore holes into his back. And so do you.
I've got to do something. I have to do something.
Doria, I'm sorry I touched...
Leave me alone.
Her voice was low, just 1 step above a whisper. No. He said that as firmly as he could. Maybe if he acted as though she were all right, she might be.
If I close my eyes, does the world go away?
I need you to glow this sword. Make it give off light. As if of its own volition, his hand moved towards her. He jerked it back. You're part of this group. You're one of us. And we need your help. Ahira. Carl's hand grasped his shoulder, urging him away. Not now. We'll use the lanterns for a while. Maybe she'll be up to it later. No! He shrugged the hand off.
You can't help a cripple by ignoring the disability. That just makes things worse. You compensate for it, but you don't ignore it.
He shook his head to clear it.
But isn't that what I was trying to do just a few moments ago? Maybe it isn't easy to deal with someone else's handicap either.
Doria, I'm not going to stop bothering you until you do it. Careful not to touch her, he grasped the sword by the blade and slid the hilt between her hands. Take it. Make it glow. Her lips moved fractionally without sound. Do it. At first, her voice was a whisper, a quiet, distant rustle of breath. Then the sound grew louder, nearer, stronger, a rush of airy syllables that vanished as they touched his ears. And the sword began to glow. Faintly. The dim blue of the sky before dawn. Then brighter, the color of a robin's egg. And brighter, until it fell from Doria's fingers, glowing like the flame of a Bunsen burner, bathing her face in blue light. Ahira reached out a hand, halting his fingers an inch from the blade. No heat, although it shone with a blue-hot fury. No heat at all. He extended a quivering finger and touched his finger to the metal. No heat. His finger touched only cool steel. Ahira smiled. That's beautiful. I wish I'd gone along with Eri to see him glow the blade for that smith back in Pandathaway. He picked up the sword and handed it to Carl. In the light of the blade, Aristobulus smiled. You still would be impressed. If I'd tried to get a blade this bright, the glow would have lasted for only an hour or so. Doria, the dwarf said gently, how long will this last? It's beautiful. He knew the answer, but he needed to hear her say it. Her head nodded fractionally, her hands trembling as she knitted her fingers together. Always. Carl's hand fell on his shoulder. I think it's time we got going. Yes, Doria whispered. Home. The sword held high to scatter the light as widely as possible. Carl picked his way behind Ahira, the muscles in his shoulders burning like hot wires. It was as though they were walking through the insides of some gargantuan stone worm. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading downward all the way, but never losing its tubular shape or branching off. His arms hurt, but he couldn't let both hang at his sides, except when they stopped to rest. The last time had been a while ago, but how long? Who could tell? Just for something to do, he tinged the point of the sword against the ceiling overhead. Stop it, Ahira snapped from in front of him. Why, Stop it! The dwarf had gotten nastier the further down the tunnel they went. Ahira? The dwarf didn't turn around. What is it now? How long? How long until what? Until we get there? I don't know. No, Aristobulus called from behind. How long until we stop to rest? His voice was ragged. The wizard wasn't holding up well. From the rear of the group, Walter's baritone drifted forward. I've got a better question. How long until the water gives out? And what do we do then? Relax, the dwarf said, sounding anything but relaxed himself. I've figured that out. He paused to pick his way around a pile of rocky rubble that was echoed above by a gap in the ceiling. We go along until we either find the gate or use up just over half our water. Carl squeezed through between the rubble pile and the wall, barking his shin in the process. He waited on the other side, extending his hand to help Aristobulus through. The wizard nodded his thanks. Andy was next. She hesitated for a moment before accepting his help. Thank you. Her voice dripped insincerity. My, aren't we getting formal? And you are most welcome, milady. She turned away, but not before he caught a trace of a smile. Carl shrugged, moving aside to let Doria make her own way through. Figuring out why Andy did what wasn't certain to be a waste of time and effort, but close enough. The trouble with women is that they're too damn intelligent. Walter moved easily through the narrow passage, balancing himself like a dancer. Want to switch for a while? Gratefully, Carl handed him the sword, accepting the thief's scimitar in return. He slipped it under his belt, then folded his arm across his chest and rubbed viciously at his shoulders. Forcing someone to keep an arm overhead would make a fine torture, and probably had been used as such. Perhaps in the Colosseum of Pandathaway? No, probably not. Too gentle. People who would chain Elegon in the middle of a cesspool would have much worse than that in store for someone they were angry at. But we're going home. All we have to do is tiptoe by a dragon. The dragon. Carl? Andy's form was just a silhouette in the light of the sword beyond her. Are you going to fall asleep standing up, or would you be so kind as to come along with the rest of us? He didn't bother with a sarcastic smile. She probably couldn't see it anyway. Still massaging his shoulders, he set off after the others. Once we get to the other side, Andrea Andropoulos, you and I are going to talk this out, without interruptions. And then, yours truly is going to see if he can drink Walter Slavatsky under the table. Ahira was the first to see the skeleton, of course, because of both his position at the front of the group and his dark sight. But he came close to stumbling over it. A distant, obscene reek had him distracted. It was a strange odor, far different from the cool, moist smell of the unending tunnel.
Probably just imagining it.
He shook his head and sniffed twice. Nothing. He shrugged and started to move on, and caught himself in mid-step, the blackened skull barely an inch beneath the sole of his sandal. Ahira teetered on one leg for a moment, like an aerialist on a high wire. "Hold it." He regained his balance and motioned Hakim forward, stepping aside to bring the skull out of his shadow. It lay on its side in the middle of the tunnel, hollow eye sockets staring blindly, open jaw leering, loose bones arrayed behind it in a charred trail. "What the—" "Shh," Ahira whispered. "Nobody say anything. Just stay where you are." He knelt on the rough stone beside the skull, Hakim moving the glowing sword closer without any need to be asked. The skull had lain there a long time. Dust on the upper surface was so thick that Ahira's probing fingers sank into the feathery surface past his fingernail, almost to the first joint. Years, certainly. Possibly centuries. He rubbed his finger against his chest. Beyond the skull, a charred rib cage lay, arm bones to the side, the pelvis and the long bones of the legs arrayed as though the victim had sprawled out before its flesh had vanished. To the left of the rib cage, a round shield lay, its concavity cupping the floor of the tunnel. No design on its face, just blackness. Blackness and charred bones. That didn't make any sense. Unless... Ahira wiped his hand across the surface of the shield. It came away black, leaving behind a dirtied outline of the design that had once decorated the shield's face. 3 golden circles. Ahira wiped his other hand against the wall. It too came away sooty. Hakim smiled and leaned close. "My friend," he whispered, his lips a scant inch from Ahira's ear. "It seems to me that we're almost there." Ahira nodded.
Take it slow now.
"Pass the word down. Everyone is to take his pack off and leave it. Sandals too. We go barefoot from here on in."
And quietly. Quietly.
But as he turned to look into the others' fear-whitened faces, he knew that there was no need to say that. Ahira's heart pounded.
I can send them home. And if I don't make it out of here in half the time it took to get in, I deserve to die of thirst.
Hakim turned back from his whispering to Andrea.
"I think we can quit the pretense, James. This is the end of the line for you, no? You aren't coming with us."
Ahira smiled.
"I'll see you to the gate. I'll see you through the gate. But—"
He trailed off, shrugging. Hakim nodded.
"I understand. Do you explain it to the others, or—"
"I'll leave the explanations to you, for the other side."
It's almost done. Over. And how can I say goodbye to all of them?
His eyes started to mist over. He caught himself. This wasn't a time to get sentimental.
"Oh," he whispered, as gruffly as he could. "We won't want that sword anymore. Drop it right here."
Hakim smiled, shrugged, and dropped the glowing blade, snatching it out of the air scant inches before it would have clanged on the stone. His smile and his wide-armed shrug said, "Sorry, I couldn't resist it." Ahira's glare answered, "Try real hard next time." Chapter 15. The Dragon at the Gate. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it for ever and ever. But the cormorant and the bittern shall possess it. The owl and the raven shall also dwell in it. And he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. And it shall be an habitation for dragons. Isaiah ben Amoz. As the distant glow of the abandoned sword faded behind, a rainbow phosphorescence fingered the walls of the tunnel ahead. Carl furrowed his brow. Just a lucky coincidence, or had Ahira spotted it back at the skeleton? He clenched the hilt of the scimitar. It probably didn't matter. If it hadn't gotten brighter ahead, Ahira would have sent him back for the sword. Stumbling around in the dark was almost certainly more dangerous than a bit of light. The other choice, of course, would have been for all of them to link hands, but... No, that wouldn't have been another choice. Not unless they left Doria behind. The tunnel curled like the coils of a snake, winding downward ever steeper. He was glad that Ahira had forced them all to rid themselves of their sandals. Any grip less sure than that of bare feet, and Aristobulus at least, would have fallen. Just in front of him, Andy stumbled. He whipped his free arm around her waist, catching and lifting her before she could fall. As he set her on her feet, she gave his hand a quick squeeze and favored him with a slight nod.
Now isn't the time to work that out, he thought. There'll be plenty of time when we're back on the other side. Home.
Ahead, Ahira motioned for a stop, then beckoned to Walter. A few whispered words passed between the two, and then the thief crept on hands and knees downward, around the next bend in the tunnel. Seconds passed. Carl was sure it was only seconds. He counted 89 of his own heartbeats before Walter returned, and Ahira urged them all back away from the bend and into a kneeling circle. Chance put Carl between Andy and Doria. He pressed away from the cleric, noting that Walter, on the other side of her, was similarly squeezing up against the smaller form of Aristobulus.
"I saw it,"
Walter whispered, so quietly that Carl had to strain his ears to hear the thief over the beating of his own heart.
"It's about 100 yards away from where the tunnel dumps out. At about 10 o'clock, if your back's to the tunnel. Understand?"
Carl nodded in unison with the others.
"And the dragon is sleeping," Walter continued. "But we've got to pass in front of it to get to the gate. And I don't know if we'll need Ari to operate it for us."
He raised a quizzical eyebrow. The wizard shook his head.
"Either we're in a very bad way, or it's as I think, automatic. Does it look like water? Good. Then we're safe."
"One more problem," the thief whispered. "There's only enough room for us to go single file, or just one at a time."
Ahira rubbed at his temples with blunt fingers.
"One at a time. Hakim first."
"No." Carl shook his head, pointing to Andy.
"She goes first. We do it my way," the dwarf hissed.
Well, it made sense in a way. The thief was best at moving silently. Carl nodded slowly.
"But she's next."
"I got her into this. I've got to see that she gets out of it."
The dwarf hesitated for a moment.
"Agreed. Then Doria."
"You're not thinking, Ahira. Doria could easily turn out to be a problem."
"No. Then Ari."
"You and I can take Doria out if need be, and each in our own way, you and I are responsible for her."
But he couldn't say that, and didn't need to. A few seconds of thought would let the dwarf reach the same conclusion. Ahira sighed.
"Perhaps you're right. Hakim, get going."
"See you."
Walter briefly clasped hands with Carl, then Aristobulus, then chucked Andy under the chin. She jerked her head away and grabbed his hand. "Just be careful," she whispered. "I'll be along." Walter took a slow, long look at Doria, then threw his arms around Ahira. Carl couldn't make out Walter's whispered words, except for the last two. "Be well." The thief crawled away, then rose silently to the balls of his feet and disappeared around the bend. Silence. Ahira tapped Andy's shoulder.
"Go."
Carl smiled.
"See you in a little while."
Her chin trembled. A stray lock of hair fell across her nose. Carl brushed it away.
"Go."
She nodded and left. Ahira beckoned at Aristobulus.
"Get ready."
Aristobulus started to rise, then stopped. "No, all at once."
"No," the dwarf said, shaking his head. "You next. Carl and I will take care of Doria."
Aristobulus shrugged and seated himself carefully on the floor, a study in simulated nonchalance. "I'll wait."
We've all grown, Carl thought. I think he's wrong to pull this, but it's not coming from that damn self-centeredness that I used to hate in him.
"No time to argue."
He reached for the wizard, and found his wrists caught in Ahira's huge hands. The dwarf's mouth quirked. He dropped Carl's wrists and spread his arms, shrugging as though to say, "What can we do?"
"Fine,"
the dwarf said, unlimbering his axe from his chest.
"Single file. First Carl, then you, then Doria, then me."
The wizard nodded and stood. Carl rose silently to his feet, as did Aristobulus. Ahira urged Doria to stand. Sullenly, clumsily, she did. Carl took the lead and tiptoed around the bend, and into a brightness that stung his eyes, and a silent, moldy reek that ached in his nostrils. It smelled of age, and cruelty, and hatred, and dragon. The dragon lay sleeping in the huge chamber, a cavern lit by glowing rainbowed crystals that lined the walls, arching hundreds of yards above the rough floor. Its huge head, wickedly saurian, rested on crossed forelegs the size of centuries-old oak trunks. Elegon had been right. He was just a baby, a miniature, smoother version of this. The smallest of the dragon's mottled scales was easily Carl's height. Its mouth could have swallowed an elephant, and the teeth sent chills running down Carl's back. They stood tall and sharp, threatening the yellowed edges through which the dragon's fetid breath whistled, like wind through a horrid forest. He wrestled his eyes from the dragon and looked around the cavern. Beyond the creature's left shoulder, a mirror gleamed, a surface rippled. The gate. Carl tiptoed slowly forward, his feet numb on the cold stone floor. The gate hung unsupported in the air, just above a narrow ledge. Its surface rippled, shimmering in the cavern's light, as the gate stood, silently waiting, like a pool of water tipped on its side. A stone ramp led up to the gate, tapering from a wide base to where it became a stone ledge. There was no way that more than one person could stand on that ledge. It couldn't have been more than 2 feet square. They would have to go through one by one. He turned and waved for Ahira and Aristobulus to bring Doria forward. Both of them beckoned to her.
"Come on, Doria, just a little further."
No response. She stood still, staring wide-eyed at the dragon, her jaw clenched and quivering. A trickle of blood ran out of the corner of her mouth and dripped, one drop at a time, onto her white robes. Ahira shook his head as he turned to face Carl. "No good," he mouthed. "We need a diversion. Diversion." He pointed to Carl, then Aristobulus, and then the gate. "You two wait at the ramp. I'll bring her." Carl nodded, then walked slowly by the dragon's head, Aristobulus at his side. The 100-yard walk to the ramp took him past the dragon's bulging midsection. If only it had a decent sword, he could...
"What? A mosquito could do more harm to me than I could do to that."
He gripped the hilt of Walter's scimitar.
"Not unless I stuck it in the eye, and I couldn't reach that with a stepladder."
And perhaps he wouldn't even be able to stick this sword through its lids. Then again, Doria screamed, shattering the thick silence. "Humans!" A roar shook the cavern, sending light-bearing crystals tinkling to the floor, knocking Carl off his feet. Slowly, ponderously, the head lifted and turned, the man-high eyelids retracting. "Over here!" Aristobulus shouted, his voice breaking. "The eyes, Carl! The eyes!" Carl bounced to his feet, the scimitar held in his right hand. "I know, I'll—" His voice caught in his throat as the head turned, 2 immense liquid eyes staring directly at him. Behind Carl, Aristobulus' voice murmured harsh syllables, spoken and then gone, while over at the entrance, Ahira threw Doria's struggling body over his shoulder and broke into a sprint. The dragon's mouth opened. "Burn!" Its eyes gleamed. "And done!" Aristobulus clapped his hands together, and shone, brighter and brighter until they flared with the light of 1,000 suns. Ari's light spell. The dragon was blinded. Carl ducked to one side as a gout of flame scoured the stone where he had stood. Aristobulus hiked up his robes and wordlessly sprinted up the ramp, not slowing as he reached the top, dived through the gate, and was gone. A heavy, limp mass knocked Carl off his feet. Doria. "Over here! Burn me, you son of a pig!" Ahira shouted, his battle-axe drawn. He raced away from the gate, the dragon's head following him. "Get through! Take her! Move!" Carl snatched up Doria as though she were a piece of fluff, and ran with her up the ramp, to the gate. A quick one-handed throw, and she was gone. He turned. Ahira ducked a flame breath, and dashed for the tunnel's opening. Like a felled tree, the dragon's tail slammed down in front of the hole. the impact on the floor of the cavern knocking Ahira over.
"Over here, now!" Carl shouted. "We'll take turns with your attention, dragon!"
The light in the dragon's eyes was already beginning to dim. Aristobulus's light spell was wearing off. A few seconds more, and Carl and Ahira would be trapped in the cavern, the dragon's sight restored.
"You will burn!"
Ahira ran towards Carl, the dragon's head following him. Carl hesitated in front of the gate. Ahira couldn't run fast enough. It didn't seem to take the dragon long between flame breaths, and the gaping mouth was coming to bear on the dwarf.
"Not him!" Carl shouted. "Try and burn me, dragon!"
At the base of the ramp, the dwarf stumbled and started scrabbling up it on all fours.
"Carl, go!"
A rush of flame caught Ahira. The force of the gout of fire slid the dwarf up the ramp as he crackled and screamed in the flame, his arms waving aimlessly. Carl turned and dived for the gate, his legs burning behind him. A searing mass struck him in the back, and the world dissolved into a white-hot nightmare that faded only slowly into utter black. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 15. The party has escaped through the gate, or at least most of them have. Things don't look too good for Ahira/James. What will they do now if the gate works and they are returned to their world? How can they, return to normal lives after what they have experienced? We will find the answers for those questions in the final part. I hope this latest installment has continued to be enjoyable. The channel has been growing recently, as has the subscriber count, for which I am immensely grateful. I hope one day I can have even more people listening to these recordings. Thank you for listening, and have a good night.